The views and opinions on the Craig L. Hayes Show do not necessarily reflect those of Westgate Resorts, ownership, or management. And now, on with the show. This is the Craig L. Hayes Show.
And there we go. You know these buttons you got to push on and off. You don't hit the mute button. Sound guys, you know. It's got two little switches on it, and I mess up on that. But I save everything. I don't ever get rid of anything. Welcome to the show, everybody. Today's the 20th of July, 2025. And we're here at the Westgate Resort, Las Vegas. And we are continuing our episodes in our series of Behind the Curtain. What goes on behind the curtain? All the stories of all the people who work on showrooms, stages in Las Vegas and other parts of the country. I want to first just thank Cammie Christensen for allowing me. She is the president of the hotel. Thank you for allowing me to be here and do this podcast from this historic place, along with Dawn Rawls. She is the vice president of marketing and entertainment, and she's it was one of the people also. And John Peer, he's the no, he's not vice president. He's a director of technical operations and entertainment. He's got a kind of a strange title. He's a technical director. Let's put him that way. Here at the hotel. Thank you, everybody, for allowing us to do this. We are in Elvis Presley's dressing room in the basement in the International Showroom. And right next door to us is Barry Manilow's private dressing room. So the two people that have the most shows here in this showroom have rooms right next to each other. And we're doing it from Elvis's because he no longer occupies this. So anyways, folks, as we get going, we're going to continue with our episodes like we're saying. And today's guest is someone I've known for quite some time here in Las Vegas. And he actually worked here as the head audio for, I can't remember how many years. We'll talk about that in this room and in the other room next door. And we're going to discuss showbiz in his life and our lives and where it's going here in Las Vegas. So welcome to the show, Mike Beyer.
Hi there.
Hey there. Thank you very much. I'm here. Where? So let's talk about some show business. Like we were talking a little bit before we went on the air. Let's just talk a little bit about where you came from, you know, because everyone always thinks that people who work in the showrooms and the hotels all must be like born and bred here in this town and nowhere else. It's like, you know, people come from all over the world to work here. So what's your story?
Let's see. I was born in Sacramento, California, and grew up there. Was there for about 30 years, something like that. I went to Rio Americano High School, the same high school that Barbie Benton went to, actually. And I actually got to talk to her about it once. That was pretty funny. In a showroom here at Caesar's Palace. Anyway, I then moved to the Bay Area for a couple of years. I'd been touring for a while at that point. And then decided to come here to not have to be on the road all the time. So that was why I moved here. I had a friend, Darren Cray, who talked me into moving here. He's a good lad, and was my crew chief, my sound crew chief on tour back in the Tesla days. But anyway, talked me into moving here, and so I thought it was a great idea because I could do audio and not have to tour and watch my kids grow up, because that was the hardest part, was missing out on so much of that. And then I've been here what is that now? 31 years? 31 years.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
You got here in 94, so yes, 31 years.
Yeah. And, came here, got divorced and remarried at one point, and had two children who are now teenagers. And, loads of fun. And we're just going to school with, they're going to school, and one's about to go to college. The other one is making music with me, and also in this union, getting in this union. And that's about it, really.
Well, that's the quick overview. Like I say, some people like doing a quick overview, and then we go back and we start picking things apart a little bit. When you said Tesla days, you and Darren Craig, that's Tesla the band, not the car company, people. Just so you understand, there is actually a band called Tesla.
And they are from Sacramento.
Yeah, and so that's kind of funny. Yeah, now Tesla, and nobody knows anything else but Tesla cars, so that's kind of funny. So Barbie Benton, that's another odd reference there. I mean, you and I know who that is, and probably guys our age and stuff like that. But I wonder how many people would know who she is. We all know because she was a hottie. She was a good-looking woman back in the days. And Sacramento, what was it like being in Sacramento?
It's actually a great city. I loved growing up there. It's hot, but not as hot as here. But it gets in the hundreds. There's 1,000 things to do that don't cost any money. I like that about it. I live on my bike, or I try to, and that it has one of the greatest bike trails in the country. It's like 40 miles long, all along the American River Parkway there, and the Sacramento River at one point. It's just a great place to ride, get into shape, see a bunch of nature, beavers and deer. There's lots of those. It's pretty cool. And I go back a lot. My kids love it there for some reason. And so we go visit friends and family and experience Northern California.
Well, good. Yeah, I don't think I've ever been to Sacramento. I've been to other places, but never Sacramento. But I know several people from it, and they loved it. They just love living there. In high school, did you do any AV, audio, anything like that? Were you one of us AV nerds back in high school?
Actually, no.
Okay.
There wasn't so much of that going on, because we're kind of up there. So there was only like some, projectors and things. I didn't do any of that stuff. I was in sports and that kind of stuff, and a lot of private sports. Like I was a speed skater, and I ran cross country at high school. What else did I do? I was a bowler. Actually, I was a really good bowler. But there was really no girls at bowling, or not that many. It was much better at the skating rink, so that's where I used to hang out.
Yeah, they don't consider bowlers jocks or something,
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. Did you do college or anything like that, or?
I did some college. I was at American River College for a while. Then I did some recording college stuff. That's where I was learning audio. But I started there in the clubs. That's how I got into what I do. I was actually taking guitar lessons for a couple of years, and my guitar teacher, who's also one of my best buddies and my roommate at one point, he said, "I know this band. They need a sound guy. I'll bet you'd be really good at that." And I said, I've always been a little bit interested in that. So I went down there, and I pushed up faders, and it just made sense, like immediately. It was the weirdest thing. I'd never done it. Didn't have the heart to tell the band I'd never done it. And I pushed up faders, and it just came to me. It was the strangest thing. It was like I was born to do it. And they came, they came running up to me like after the first set, like, "Wow, this is going really well." And I'm like, "Yeah." And I was having fun. And at the end of the night, they came up to me and said, "Oh my God," one of the singers, he kept coming out front because they had two singers. And he said, "Man, it sounded great out there, and our friends say it sounds great out there." And they said, "You're way better than the guy we had." And I said, "How long did you have him?" And they're like, 5 years. I was like, "Whoa, okay." And so they said, "Come back tomorrow night." So I came back the next night, mixed 4 sets. And they said, "I guess we better start paying you." And I was like, "Okay." And then I thought, I guess I better really know what I'm doing. So then I started self-studying every night. So I'd mix 4 or 5 sets, go home, study audio. I started out like, I'd see, slew rate, what's that? And I'd look it up. And that's kind of how I started. I just started looking at terms, studying, and then later I had a friend that was in recording college, and I kind of went there a bunch on his, his tuition. He was like, man, I'm really not into this audio stuff. I'm into the music business end of it. And then I even did his final form. I got him an A. It was private school.
Yeah.
I didn't really care that much. They were kind of hippies anyway. It was in San Francisco, right? So it was. I brought a band in, did a session there with someone who's actually a fairly famous producer engineer kind of guy, and I had recorded a band, did all the mic selection stuff, blah 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 blah, did all the paperwork, and I was like, okay, this works for me. So, and then I got all the curriculum from there and all the acoustics curriculum, and actually self-studied everything at home. I mean, I was really into it. So, and then through that time, the band I was with, they were probably like the number 4 band in town or 5, something like that when I started. And within a couple of years, they were the number 1 band in town, number 1 or 2, something like that. As far as, club bands, it was 1980 when I started. So around that time, I don't know, I had been doing that for quite a while, trying to figure all this stuff out, got pretty good. And then other people started coming around going, hey, maybe you could mix our band, blah, 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 blah. And it was like a full-time gig at that point. I was working in a grocery store when I started, and it was kind of a cool boutique grocery store, but it was not fun after a while. It was one of those things where you carry out everyone's groceries, which led to some interesting situations. But, they forced you to carry out everyone's groceries, and some people got mad. It was pretty funny. We would have guys that would be all macho and, nobody carries out my groceries. I don't need that.
So it didn't matter who, you had to carry theirs out.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, you just...
All right.
That was like part of the thing, was the service thing. It was definitely a boutique store back when there wasn't very many of them. So, I did that for a while, for like a couple of years. I'd already been doing that for like a year or so when I started doing sound. And a couple of years in, I thought, I'm making more money doing sound. And it was funny because it was a union grocery store gig. But it didn't pay that much. So finally I was like, you know what? I'm having more fun. I'm making more money. Screw these guys. Plus they were, management wasn't very fun. It was real political, and I used to get written up for stuff like, weird things, and that I really didn't do anything wrong. And I was like, this isn't cool. And so I stopped. In fact, I purposely quit on my 3rd anniversary. That was pretty funny.
Well, you lasted a while.
Yeah.
My time as a grocery clerk and all that lasted about 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, I'm done with this. So,
Yeah, it was my first real full-time job, so,
Yeah.
I had to have some kind of history, and then, I moved out with my girlfriend and all that good stuff back in the day. But anyway, and then that went on from there. I kind of had the band got management. Guys were putting money into them, and they were not the world's greatest songwriters because they were trying to get them to write songs, get a record deal, all that stuff, and they just weren't that kind of band. So after a while, there was a lot of difference of opinion with management, who was completely inexperienced. It was a guy that owned an auto parts importing company. Good businessman, but not a music guy. But he loved music, so it was real. He would like yell out things at me like, turn up, the keyboards. I'm not hearing the keyboard. And it was like, the keyboard player can't play. He's not very good. It was not a fun time. And so I was trying to best foot forward mix that.
Trying not to make it obvious. And
Well, yeah, when you got a 2-guitar rock song and a guy's playing Prophet 5 over it, you know, it was like stuff that's not very, very cool. You don't mix it forward. And so that kept happening. And I was like, man, you don't know what you're doing. And button heads. And I was young and, you know, I just wasn't very politically adept at the time. So finally we had a big falling out, and it was interesting. He tried to, like, you know, godfather me, you know, you'll never work in this town again. Yeah. So
wow.
one of those things, and we had this huge falling out. And this story actually is interesting later because it comes back around. So then I split. There was another band that was interested, and so I went to work for them. And it was funny because it was another band that had a girl singer and a guy singer, and, you know, it was cover bands, you know, playing clubs, moving around town, and some travel stuff. But I did that for a while, and same thing. They started out as probably the number 6 band in town, and were number 1 or 2 within a couple of years. And then we got to this point where there was this big band meeting, because I kept making more and more money, and there was this big band meeting called, and they're like, why is he making more money than us? And I'm like, what? I didn't even know. And you know, and it's funny because the band manager guy's a great guy. He's still a friend of mine. And he said to them, look, you know, this guy came in, you guys were down here, okay? The only difference is he came in, and then they had another guitar player that came in who's a lifetime friend of mine too, still. Great guy. But they said, really, you know, he said to them, really, this guy totally changed the way you guys sound, totally changed the way you're presented. We're making way more money, you're doing better. And can you say that you're more important than him? Which I thought was crazy. I was like, what? You know, because you're band members. It's your show.
Yeah.
And they went, well, okay. And so it was the strangest thing. I never even thought about that. I was like, well, I'm making more money than him. It was really odd. So that continued on and went for a few years. And then, and I kept, you know, I jumped from band to band for a while. And then back, the same, you know, the original band I was with the falling out with the manager and everything, there's this bunch of young kids that opened for this band. You know, young kid band playing a bunch of kind of heavier rock. A couple of them were teenagers. And they were called Earthshaker. And they're like, they came to open up for us. And they were a bunch of kids. And they said, look, we don't have a sound guy, but we don't have any money to pay you. And I said, dude, it's on the house. You guys are great. I like you guys. Don't worry. I got it. So I mixed them for a while when they'd open up for us. And they couldn't even come, a lot of them couldn't even come out into the club. They could only play on stage and go back to the dressing room because they were underage.
Yeah.
And one of them was a 15-year-old kid who had hair down to the middle of his back and kind of looked like Randy Rhoads. And he was this amazing guitar player. And I was like, God, this kid's so good. And they were doing like Scorpions and, you know, kind of heavier rock stuff. And they were really good at it. And, it, you know, and the guitar player and the bass player right away, we got pretty close and they were buddies. And then there's a period that after I had a falling out with that band, with the manager, I didn't see him for a couple of years. 2-3 years later, I get a phone call from that manager, and man, he took a swing at me and stuff when I left. I mean, it was bad. He calls me up and he said, man, I'm so sorry about all that stuff. you know, I'm hoping it's water under the bridge now, man, but I am so sorry. It's my fault. I didn't get where you were coming from. He's like, look, man, I got this band, these kids, and they're working on getting a record deal. And they're gonna do a bunch more showcases, and we really need someone like you to get them over the top. You're the guy in town. You're it. You know, please help us out. I was like, well, what's the deal with all that, And he goes, well, I can't give you a ton of money. He goes, but I will throw money to you, and we're going to stay in good hotels and stuff. I stay in good hotels. It's on my dime. He goes, I got you. If you will just, it's not going to be all the time, but we really need you to, we'll sound as good as we could possibly sound at these record company showcases if it's you. We really need you. And I was like, all right. And it was those kids. Those same kids that used to open for us, except they had changed some members out. So the guitar player, the kid that was 15, when I started with these guys, was Frank Hannon, who's the guitar player for Tesla. And the bass player was Brian Wheat, who was the bass player for Tesla. They had a bunch of other guys who, had left by that time. And they had gotten Troy Laketta, the drummer from Eric Martin, in the band, and they had hired this crazy, singer guy from, he was an Okie that had moved to Arkansas and then moved to Georgetown, California, which is kind of up in the hills near Sacramento, Jeff Keith, who was still the singer for Tesla. And we went out and did showcases, and we ended up helping get them signed. And I spent the next 6-7 years with those guys, and all the way, and then they got management. There was a point where they got handed off because, their guy could only take them so far, and they got Peter Mensch and Cliff Bernstein, who also still manage Metallica to this day. And back then they had Def Leppard, later Queensryche.
That's a good move. That's a good move.
Yeah, it was a pretty good move.
That's a good move.
And they brought me in, and they ended up having me do a bunch of their stuff, a bunch of their, multiple bands. I ended up doing Queensryche, Operation Mindcrime, tour managing and mixing that. And it's funny because Peter came to me on that one and said, hey, this band just made the record of the decade, and there's only 2 people in the world that can mix these guys. It's you or Robert Scoville, and Robert's busy. So I really need you to do this.
Which album?
That was Operation Mindcrime.
Okay.
So it was 1988.
They are very complex musicians. Man, they are some good stuff.
Yeah. Great songwriters and really good people. Especially, Chris and I really hit it off. He was such a great guy. And, one of the principal songwriters, et cetera, et cetera. So we ended up on the Metallica tour on Operation Mindcrime. We were on the And Justice for All tour with Damage Justice, whatever they called it, and did 7 months on that and a bunch of stuff on our own, and that was quite an experience.
Yeah,
and it was great that it was same management. I became friends back with their tour manager Bobby Schneider, who was a great guy who I'd worked with Tesla before, actually, on some time off from Metallica. He had been out with us when we were a baby band. We had just started touring, and then it was a pretty crazy time. I'm at some point hoping to write a book and a movie about that. just all the stuff that, we went through a lot of stuff, learned a lot. We were young. I mean, I was 27, I think, when I first really started doing
touring
world tour stuff.
Yeah, awesome.
I'd done some smaller stuff.
Okay. Well, we're going to hold it right here. That's our first episode, believe it or not.
Okay.
And we're going to move on. We'll take a couple-minute break, reset, and then we're going to do some more of this stuff. So until then, Talbot, take it away.
This is the Craig L. Hayes Show.